Thank you all so very much for coming along to this evening's presentation of Streams of Solidarity. The main topic of conversation this evening is going to be the RSPCA. With us this evening, our main guest is going to be Martin Whybrow. He was an RSPCA branch trustee for 4 years before resigning, and is one of those driving the current call for the world's largest and oldest animal welfare charities to publicly support the transition to a plant-based future. RSPCA is something that I do highly recommend that everybody goes ahead and looks up, do Google search, get some history on it, because it is absolutely fascinating. I thought the RSPCA was old, but it is nowhere near as old as it is. The RSPCA was originally founded in 1824 by Richard Martin, William Wilberforce, and the Reverend Arthur Broom. The Reverend Arthur Broom went on to debtor's prison to cover the finances for the RSPCA in their first years, while William Wilberforce was actually a leader in the abolition of slave trade. So you do have this organization that is very, very heavy in its civil rights and its just rights that are just pushing. I'm going to go ahead and stop that for a little bit and quickly, before I forget again, go ahead and introduce my co-host for this evening, Alison. How are you doing, Alison?
I'm fine, thanks. Just to let you know, people, what I'll do is keep an eye on the chat. If you've got questions, please do ask as many as you like. We'll definitely have questions at the end, but I think what we're going to have is a quick, a short film of Jane's passionate speech at the RSPCA campaign, and then we're going to have Martin, who was also there and part of it, let the people in as well. There's a couple of people coming in, who's going to give us a talk, who also was involved in that campaign.
Yeah, and that's basically it. So the speech that we're going to be showing is a speech that Jane gave when Animal Rebellion were occupying the RSPCA building back in August. So Martin, if you could tell us a little bit about Jane.
Yeah, by all means. So we're going to see Jane in a minute. And as you said, Michael, this was within the headquarters of the RSPCA when we did the occupation. Jane was a national trustee of the RSPCA for 10 years and tried to effect change from within. She basically found that that was a decade worth of banging her head against a brick wall. And as you'll see in a moment, she is very, very passionate about the RSPCA actually sort of going back to its roots. The founders that you mentioned, Michael, would probably be turning in their grave now if they could see what the RSPCA has become. One of the things that we have emphasized, and I think Jane mentions in her speech, is that sort of bravery, the sort of the innovative risk-taking that those founders adopted almost 200 years ago has been lost. And we also think that the nearing 200-year anniversary would be a great time for the RSPCA to regain those sort of qualities. So Jane is also very active in the animal rights movement as a whole. She runs something called Humane League, which is taking a sort of legal approach to try and improve animal welfare. And I definitely recommend that if you want to have a bit more information about some of the other stuff that goes on around animal rights, then have a look at the Humane League. And Jane is now sort of working from the outside. She was with myself and one other that initially visited the RSPCA. And in a minute, I'll go through the sort of timescales and what's happened to now. But for now, I'll probably just let Jane speak because she does it a lot better than I do, and we can have a quick look at her in action.
Board trustee here for 10 years. I spent 10 years of my life travelling 5 hours to come to meetings, sit in that room that actually is just there, and see nothing progress, really. So we tried our best, those of us on the board that were a little more progressive, but nothing moved. So I'm really proud to be here with Animal Rebellion. Some of the staff have asked me why I'm here. I'm here because the RSPCA isn't doing enough fast enough. They are doing little bits, of course they are, but not enough, not quickly enough, not with the urgency that we should have. So I'm proud, really proud, to be here with everyone here. These are passionate people who don't get paid for being here. They're giving up their time, their education, their livelihoods to campaign for what is right, to campaign for your futures, your children's futures, your grandchildren's futures. I'm proud to be here. We work with the methods of Martin Luther King and the civil rights resistance. We come peacefully to make people aware, and we will make people aware. It's going in the Metro, possibly the Independent. People will hear us, and if they don't hear us today, what are we going to do? Come back until they do, right? Yeah. Martin Luther King said, I have a dream. We have a dream. Every one of us has a dream. We have a dream of a kinder, safer world that's just for all. A future that's not going to be burnt into cinders. People fighting for diminishing resources. We have a dream, and we will make that dream come true. So the climate crisis is here and now. We've been touched recently by the extreme heat, wildfires, drought, and crop failure. In other countries, of course, it's far, far worse. We're the lucky ones. This is just the beginning, RSPCA. We may see a world where 3 billion people are displaced because of the climate crisis. Some of them already have been. In the UK, people will be displaced because of flooding, so we won't get away unscathed. The world we face is not anything any of us can imagine. An ever-decreasing resource availability as crops fail across the world. And more people fighting desperately for the resources that are getting fewer and fewer. But I do want to just draw a little bit from somebody else's speech. This isn't a speech of disaster. It's a speech of we can still change, but we need organisations like the RSPCA to listen, move quickly to achieve that change. The climate crisis is interwoven with a crisis for wild animals, a crisis for our forests and fragile ecosystems, a crisis for humans, everyone here, their children, their grandchildren. It's a crisis for them. And it's suffering of billions of sentient beings across the world. The RSPCA prides itself on being science-based. No doubt, as you've gone around the building, you've seen its messages of science. So how then are they missing the most obvious bit of science that exists? The science is crystal clear. Animal agriculture is a leading contributor to all of those crises. A rapid phase-out of animal agriculture could stabilise emissions for 30 years while we develop other solutions to deal with the more complex fossil fuels. A rapid phase-out of animal agriculture could offset 68% of emissions humans have produced this century, 2/3 of emissions, by stopping eating sentient animals. The science is absolutely crystal clear. We must move to a plant-based future speedily. And there's still time, which is why we're here, right? To say there's still time. Get with the programme. It can be done. The RSPCA was built on really bold foundations. We're here on Wilberforce Way, which is named by the RSPCA. They chose to name it after William Wilberforce, one of their founders. William Wilberforce was an anti-slaver and one of the founders of the RSPCA. They challenged human and animal suffering, non-human animal suffering, in a bold, compassionate, brave way when others were turning away and paying no attention. They created a worldwide movement nearly 200 years ago. This was the world's first animal welfare organisation. Similar societies developed all around the world. Their message was heard. Their message can still be heard. The influence that the RSPCA could have, they literally could help us change the world if they act. Who would like the RSPCA to be part of changing the world? Woo! And you know what? I really believe they could do it. They could do it. It just takes an attitude shift. They can become a leader again, as they were when they founded 200 years ago. They can take the lead in these urgent times of crises, and they can make a massive difference. So I don't know about you, but I kind of feel like this is the beginning of our engagement with them. We had a meeting where they said the right things. Follow-up letter was quite disappointing. So we're here today to try and give them our message loud and clear, but we will be back, right? So our dream, dear RSPCA staff and volunteers around the country and associated groups around the world, is that the RSPCA steps forward and becomes bold again. That the RSPCA listens to the whisperings of William Wilberforce and others who founded a world-changing organisation. Please do it again, please. Woo! We really want the RSPCA to join us and create a safe and livable plant-based future for animals, people, and the planet. Thank you for being part of that.
So there you have Jane during the occupation of the RSPCA headquarters, setting out really eloquently and passionately why we were there on that day. So I thought what I would do, if it's sort of useful, is just provide a little bit of background as to sort of how we ended up in the RSPCA headquarters on that particular day. Explain a little bit about why the RSPCA as opposed to anybody else. Also, let you know about sort of what we're planning in terms of next steps and the way that anybody who's interested can get involved in the campaign, because as Jane said, you know, this is really the start now. There's a lot of pressure that I think needs to be put on. They're not going to shift quickly, but ultimately it would be a massive message from the world's oldest, largest animal welfare charity. We're obviously a small group, so I'm very happy for this to be as interactive as anybody wants, because you probably don't want to listen to me just in sort of monologue mode. So feel free to sort of chip in, or Alison will keep an eye on the chat and sort of interrupt me, and Michael can stop me when I start to waffle. Maybe if I just give you a very, very quick background to myself, because it was mentioned by Michael that I was an RSPCA branch trustee for 4 years. Just to give you my quick potted history, I was a Green Party councillor on Kent County Council for 8 years. I was the Green Party councillor on Kent County Council. I got elected and then got re-elected, so I did the 8 years term. In May 2021, I decided not to stand for re-election because being the only person in my party and part of a small opposition in a very Tory-dominated council, although I could get little wins here and there and I could sort of raise environmental issues. I brought a climate emergency motion, for instance. There was an enormous amount of hours banging your head against a brick wall. So what I made the conscious decision to do was step down and take those hours and use them in an activist role. So that's when I volunteered for Animal Rebellion. I'm a journalist by trade, so Animal Rebellion grabbed me for the PR and media team, and that's where I've been since then. But the sort of seeds were already sown for the RSPCA campaign when I joined, and I was very interested in getting involved because I had sort of skin in the game. I was a branch trustee. That's a completely voluntary role. And the reason I agreed to be a branch trustee was because actually I thought the branch itself was doing a lot of good work down where I live, which is Folkestone and Hythe. The branch employed and paid for an animal welfare officer, and without that branch and without that animal welfare officer, the animals in this district would be in a worse position than they are. So I was quite happy, but I always had that disquiet about RSPCA centrally and some of the policies. What I found was that there's a lot of people who have a real problem with the RSPCA, people who would sort of normally be assumed to be allies. So I found fellow vegans were often very, very upset with the RSPCA. Other animal welfare groups, charities, found them very difficult to work with. And when I sort of dug in a little bit more to some of the problems, I became sort of more and more concerned about where this charity had sort of ended up after all those sort of, after all those years. I think what we are asking of the RSPCA is absolutely common sense. Their stated mission is to improve the welfare of all animals. I think what they've forgotten is the billions of animals within the farming system. We can come on into it a little bit, and it's a little bit of a topic in its own right, but they have the RSPCA Assured scheme, a sort of fig leaf for animal farming. And that is one of the key issues I think that a lot of people have with the RSPCA. So the first step we took was we wrote a letter. We wrote to Chris Sherwood, who is the chief executive, and we set out why we wanted the RSPCA to come forward publicly and state that they were in favour of a fair transition to a plant-based future. We explained the science, we explained how that is so inherently linked, as we heard from Jane, to the climate crisis. We asked for a meeting with Chris Sherwood, and what we ended up with was a meeting with two of their senior officers. So myself, Jane and Harley, who a fair few of you may know, went down to their palatial headquarters near Horsham, and we spent a couple of hours down there and we explained our position. We had a very constructive 2 hours. I think that the two officers they had put forward were there partly because they were both vegans, and they probably thought the RSPCA that would be fine. We'd have a bit of a chat, we'd go away, and then that would be it. We waited and waited because we asked for an official response, and then a few weeks later we got an extremely underwhelming letter through, which was basically saying they were not going to make any changes. It said that they advocated for a reduction in industrial animal farming. They cited the Eat Better Alliance that they're part of. They cited the RSPCA Assured scheme. They also came up with what I thought was a really interesting single sentence. So what they seem to do is have a complete disconnect between the climate crisis and animal welfare. So they said that they recognized that animal agriculture contributed to the climate crisis, but their main focus was on animal welfare. And I think the significance there is in the but. It was if they were mutually and not connected at all. So we sort of emphasize that the climate crisis is caused by animal agriculture, or animal agriculture, as we know, is a major cause of the climate crisis. And of course, the millions of humans that are suffering are also matched by the millions of animals that are suffering at the moment via the climate crisis. So the more extreme weather, you look at the floods in Pakistan, that enormous number of people have been displaced. Estimates are well over 1 million animals have drowned. So if you are genuinely a charity that has as its remit to care about the welfare of all animals, then why wouldn't you come out and support a plant-based future? We don't actually think it's a very big request. Why the RSPCA? Well, that's probably pretty much been spelled out. They are the biggest. They have the name that really would resonate. For them to make a public declaration, we feel would be incredibly powerful and would be a lead where they led 200 years ago, where others would follow. So there would hopefully be a ripple effect. So having had the letter back, which was basically, we're doing a bit of stuff and we're not going to change, we then thought, right, what next? And that then led to the occupation. And as we panned round there, I saw you, Michael, you were one of us there. So we went down, mostly we went down by train. The RSPCA had been tipped off on the Saturday evening that we were coming. So there was police at the station. And then when we got to the headquarters, there were 2 police vans and there was a police car outside and there was a big police presence stopping us getting in. Long and short of it, we got in. There was a delivery. As you will remember, Michael, we were starting to give our speeches outside because we thought we weren't going to get into the building, but there was a delivery at the side door and we all got in the building. And that clip of Jane shows us in the big atrium on the ground floor. And the reason she keeps on looking up is because there are 3 levels and they look down onto that atrium. So she is talking to the very small number of staff that were actually in, because they've been tipped off. A lot of staff were working from home anyway. But also having had the tip off on Saturday that we were coming, the majority of the staff were working from home.
I would also just like to really quickly interject that the staff that were there, when we did first come in, people were at first quite, on edge and a bit upset. But Jane, she's just, what's the best way to describe it? Just this massive ball of love. And she was just, going around doing the rounds, talking to everyone, and just absolutely pacified any type of upset emotions that were going on. And although she is quite hyped up and passionate in the speech that she was giving, in her one-to-one conversations with staff members, it was just, it was like, you wouldn't have thought that she had been gone for as long as she did, that as long as she has been. It's she was just coming back like she'd been there the previous day. And it was that really strong bond that she already had with everyone working there. So it was fantastic to have her along.
It was, and subsequently the RSPCA has tried to portray that occupation as something very different from what it actually was. We couldn't have actually been a less intimidating bunch, I don't think. We brought food for the staff. We were that friendly. We were going around trying to offer them plant-based food. We know we're a non-violent organization. That was explained absolutely clearly to the staff that were there. We had some very constructive conversations, and it was a very friendly environment. Subsequently, in some of the communication, there has been an attempt to suggest that people were pushed over and they were terrified, has actually been used as a word, completely detached from what really happened. What did happen was we got in there and we did a day of non-violent direct action training, which was great. We used that great big open space and we did a training day. And it was probably the most salubrious environment we've used for that sort of training. You know, the RSPCA, one of the other criticisms is the amount of money that the RSPCA spends on stuff that isn't to do with animal welfare. To get to the building, we had to go past a great big stone, which has got the RSPCA logo on it. That was installed at the cost of £10,000. You go past the RSPCA flagpoles, flying the RSPCA flag. And for all the world, you know, that headquarters is like a great big corporate HQ. You could be going into a tech company or something like that. So we had the occupation. We didn't get arrested. The police just hung around for the day, and then we left at the end of the working day. We left about 4 o'clock, I think. And we then tried once more to engage with the RSPCA and once more get a meeting with Chris Sherwood, and we again got completely brushed off. Now, at about this time, the Stop Dairy campaign was starting to get into full swing. So the RSPCA campaign took a little bit of a back burner, got put on the back burner a little bit. Where we're at now is looking at what we can do next, because what we don't want to do is let the RSPCA off the hook, basically. I know that you know, Jane knows a lot of the staff, and she knows a lot of the undercurrents there, and she feels that there are genuinely people there who would be very supportive, and that there is a bit of a culture change, but there is also the old guard. So there's quite a lot of tension there within the RSPCA. But I know that she is hopeful that this is a campaign that we could actually win. I also think, from my knowledge of the RSPCA, it needs to do something quite quickly, because it is a charity that is dying, really. It's been laying off staff. The branches are all run by, or mostly run by, volunteers. Branches are closing, branches are having to be merged. It is alienating a lot of people who I think would be supporters and who would be members. One of the things I pointed out was that you know, between the occupation and now, we had the National Animal Rights March in London, and we had all these groups marching shoulder to shoulder. But what you couldn't actually imagine was the RSPCA being there on that day, which is quite damning about the RSPCA. Can you imagine the sort of conversations they would have had to be there? So why can't a charity that claims to have animal welfare at its heart actually mix with other people with the same interest? I think it shows the sort of fundamental weaknesses. The RSPCA membership as well, I think, is aging. They're not attracting young people. And so, you know, I think they need to do something. They need to be radical again. They need to become really sort of part of the driving force that says this is a key solution to the climate crisis.
You said that that there are some people on the lower level of the RSPCA who do have a bit of a radical undercurrent there. What are your thoughts about Richard Ryder, who's the new president? He was made president this year. About him taking over, because he was the RSPCA reform group that was tackling animal agriculture in 1970. And he's also one of the people who's credited for terming the coin speciesism. And he was also able to get a large chunk of money from the RSPCA to get Sea Shepherd their first boat. And to have him being moved in as a, you know, well, yeah, I mean, Sea Shepherd, they did absolutely guerrilla tactics on the water. To have him move in being president, do you think that that would be some sort of positive move in the organization?
I think he is certainly somebody that we need to try and have a conversation with. So in terms of next steps, I think his profile is very promising. But we should also remember that there have been other people who look sort of prime collaborators in this, who are very close to the RSPCA, like Chris Packham. He does feature quite a lot, and I wonder, I suspect with the president, if you're going to become the president of a charity, you've got to look in detail at the, the terms and conditions and what the charity is doing. I wonder if some of the others that have put their name to RSPCA campaigns or have come out publicly as supporters know some of the detail. From my perspective, the RSPCA Assured scheme is incredibly flawed, and I do think that if more people understood the detail of that scheme, they would be less ready to put their name to supporting the RSPCA, and I think there would be even more opposition in some ways than there is at the moment. So the RSPCA Assured scheme, as you're probably aware, is a paid-for scheme. So if you are a hatchery, a farm, a haulier, abattoir, you can be assessed by the RSPCA and you can become RSPCA assured. And they also sell licenses to food manufacturers. So the average annual revenue from the RSPCA assured scheme is £3.5 million. Now you can see the problem here, because that is obviously an important chunk of income for the RSPCA, which they are probably even more now than they were in the past, going to be very loath to give up. Now, what we really wanted to make sure we didn't do was turn this into a conversation about we want a better assured scheme. What we would like to see is the assured scheme abolished, because we've got a plant-based future. That's where the assured scheme should head. Having said that, when you look actually at what you have to do other than pay your money to become RSPCA assured, it is quite horrifying how low the bar is. I think that they are conning consumers into thinking that they are doing the right thing when they buy RSPCA assured products. So I had a look at the contradiction in terms, the welfare standards for meat chickens. It says that as a guide, you should not exceed 30,000 chickens indoors and 15,000 chickens outdoors. Firstly, those Weasley words "as a guide" are a bit of a giveaway. So the RSPCA assured terms, which you can go and have a look at online, have a lot of woolly words. They have things like aspiration. It is advised that, we would like to see. So even having set the low bar, a lot of it is not actually specified as mandatory. It's guidelines. Then just taking one of the other details about that meat chicken welfare standards book. To get the RSPCA assured logo, you can have 19 chickens per square meter indoors, or 13 chickens per square meter free range. 19 chickens a square meter is appalling. 13 chickens per square meter free range is actually the legal minimum. You don't have to do anything on that criteria for an assured badge other than the legal minimum. So the sort of assured scheme is part of the overall problem of the RSPCA. Scottish salmon farms, we all know they are dreadfully polluting. They cause horrendous disease within the farm fish and within the wild fish communities, horrendous animal welfare abuses. If you haven't seen the work of someone such as Don Staniford, I would recommend having a look. He's done a lot of undercover footage of salmon farms. Around about 70% of them are RSPCA assured. And some of the worst abuses that are uncovered by people like Viva and by Don Staniford are RSPCA assured farms. Now, in the last correspondence that we had with the RSPCA, one of the reasons they said that they weren't going to change was because they have an ambition to get more animals into the assured scheme. Now, that's quite interesting when you sort of try and get your head around that statement and around that ambition. To me, for a start, it says that they are not going to look to raise that bar at all. If their ambition is to get more animals into it, they're not going to make it harder to actually qualify. So that's sort of where we are now. We've written, we've had the meeting, we've written again, we've had the occupation, and we've had the replies. The last reply that we had was basically, well, you occupied our building, our staff were terrified, people got pushed over, we're not going to communicate with you anymore. So there's a few things that we're doing now. So just to bring everything sort of up to date, because now that the Stop Dairy campaign has gone a bit quieter, we're now sort of bringing the RSPCA campaign back to the fore. And so that's why this is a very good timing tonight. So we have just written a letter to all of the RSPCA branches. There's about 150 of them, asking them to support our demands for a plant-based future. And we are inviting them to a Zoom meeting on the 29th of November to listen to what we've got to say, to talk, to ask questions, and to discuss it. And I have quite a lot of hope that the branches will be the way to build the momentum and to build the pressure, because the branches are run by volunteers, people like me. And there are plenty of people in there who would have the same sort of disquiet that I have got, or else if it is explained to them, which is what we have tried to do with the letter that has gone out, will question more than they were before the overall RSPCA policy and the sort of diktats that come from the centre.
I want to just kind of put something out there as well, is that this whole pushing for animal welfare and plant-based future and everything like that, it's not something that is incredibly one-sided. That there are people in animal agriculture who are looking for ways to transition out, who are looking for ways of doing things better. During the summer, we had an online chat with Lawrence Candy, who was an ex-dairy farmer who's switched to veganic farming. And during our big dairy campaign, we were having evening mobilization talks, and there was on the second mobilization talk, we had one guy who came into the talk who was a dairy farmer, and he was quite interested and wanting to be engaging. And so it's the response that we've gotten from the RSPCA saying, oh, you've scared us, that it's not how, we're not having this conversation now. That's absolute rubbish, because there are people who are most certainly in there. They just don't feel like they have a voice to engage with. And I think it's those people that we are looking really more towards reaching out to. And, and how are we able to engage with the people who are entrenched in animal agriculture, who really do not like the system that they're in? Needing to help them find an answer, help them find a solution.
I think that's right. And I think within any campaign like this, you try one way, you try another way, but ultimately finding those people by sort of shaking the tree that are your allies. And they're often, as you've said, Michael, they're not the people that you would necessarily assume. I think one of the great threads of the Stop Dairy campaign that didn't get any reporting on at all were the conversations that were going on with farmers, with people like Dan, who were going to the places where farmers hang out, so farmers markets, and actually engaging with farmers. And I know from talking to Dan and to Alice and to others that were doing that, they didn't know what to expect. They thought they were going to get a very aggressive response, and they got their flak jackets on and got sort of prepared. And
I know Dan was joking
really
about.
heartening.
I know Dan was joking about how he was going to be getting a black eye by the end of the week, and was seriously expecting to get beaten up.
Yeah, and nothing of the sort from the sound of things. It was very constructive. They found a lot of common ground. So many farmers are really on the brink of going bust. They get squeezed by the system. They get pulverized by the supermarkets. Their margins are tiny, and that's before the energy crisis and inflation. And a lot of them will probably be tipped over by what's happened in the last few months. Obviously, what the national press wants to do is report the sort of shock horror. They want the clickbaits, they want the headlines. The Daily Mail wants to wind up its readership. So the sort of the really positive stuff that was going on doesn't get reported. There's quite a good publication called Positive News magazine that by its very name tries to report the uplifting stuff to try and balance what you get bombarded with from every other form of media. And they are very interested in covering that side of the Stop Dairy campaign. They would like to sort of interview some of us, talk to one or two of the farmers, and actually report on that side of things. So I think that's the same with the RSPCA campaign. We immediately, as soon as that letter went out, it went out as an email, we got straight away a really positive response from one of the trustees of the Oxford branch. And we've had other positive responses as well. What we've also had is the RSPCA getting wind of that letter and sending a counter letter to all of the branches, telling them basically not to engage. And again, portraying the occupation as some sort of storming of the Bastille, presenting us as a sort of violent, extreme organization that we know that we're not at all. I hope that the branches won't be deterred by that, and we are, as we speak, composing our next communication to the branches. But I think what we will start to do, one way or another, is to have an attempt to get a sort of bottom-up pressure movement, because the branches are pretty autonomous. They're pretty much self-funding. I know from my time as a branch trustee that there is often quite a lot of angst between the centre and the branches. The centre is often, for instance, looking at the branch and saying, how many reserves do you have? Can we have some money? And there is not sometimes a sort of great love lost. The branches are also becoming looser and looser from the centre because of the redundancies that have been made by the RSPCA. There are far fewer branch support staff now. So during my 4 years, our really good branch area support lady got made redundant, and we ended up with one person who's now got the whole of the southeast, which is a lot of branches, and so we just couldn't get the sort of support that we had before. So those branches, I think, are going to be a fairly fertile ground. So we'll see. We're going to try and get them along on the 29th. We've also given them the ability to contact us directly, anonymously, if they want to. You can see the central RSPCA starting to sort of throw its weight around, trying to tell them who they can talk to and who they can't. And actually, I hope that will get some backs up. it might actually backfire a little bit if some of those branches are fairly fed up with the central policy already. To be told that they can't talk to us might work in our favour. The other thing we're doing is on the 15th of November, so next Tuesday at 5:30, and you're all welcome if you'd like to attend. We've got a brainstorming session effectively, where you're going to get a much condensed version of this, you'll be glad to know. And then it will be over to everybody. We'll go into breakout rooms because we've already got 29 people registered for it, to sort of really look at where we can put the pressure, how we can take next steps, and to sort of really, at the end of that, prioritize a list to take us forward. So, Alison, sorry, in the gloom there, I think I can see a hand up.
No, that's okay. I was just saying, a couple of people have been put various bits and bobs in the chat, but one of the things that, are you going to come on Tuesday, Susan? Is yeah, great. Is the RSP to get involved in education through animal aid, and there are people can often respond quite positively to things, like for example in Brighton and our plant-based campaign here, I got in all primary schools. I did an impassioned presentation to the council, and we got we got a whole day of plant-based only meals, and I got a vegan meal every day, which there wasn't before, and they promised 2, but they only ended up with 1. We've got fantastic things going on with universities. I think it's 50 or 60 now, Michael. You know, there are things that are happening, and we all know about the kickback. We are, you know, I've been vegan 30 years, and I get very down about it, but the only thing that stops me getting down is just continuously working for change. And you know, I think the RSPCA have got a great opportunity to actually get their act together and just, you know, stop all that somehow. But the money is a bit of a tricky one, because hello love, that's the dog.
I assumed it was a dog. Yes.
Yeah, that is a real tricky one, but you know, I love what's kind of happening, and you know, we will get there. We just will get there, but it's a slow thing.
In the chat there, I just put a link to register for the Zoom chat that's going on next week on the 15th.
Wonderful.
Brilliant.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. I think you're right, Alison, because I think we shouldn't see the RSPCA campaign in isolation by any means. There's great stuff going on with the council's campaign, with the university campaign.
And you're absolutely right, Simon, about the bird flu. Sadly, it's just because I work with the lovely Jane in scrap factory farming, and we unfortunately keep an eye on all the horrible things that are going on. And yes, bird flu is now so prevalent, and I'm writing to newspapers about it at the moment. Anyway, sorry, I'm ended up dominating a bit.
No, it gives me a break. I can have a sip of tea. But I think it's a really good point, because, you know, bird flu, I think it's very clear, came from intensive factory farming in Asia, and it's just heartbreaking to see what it has done to the wild bird populations, the seabird populations, the gannets, the puffins. And
it's now transferred to humans. There's 2 cases in Europe.
Yeah. So again, you know, if the RSPCA can't join the dots up, there's something wrong with it. You can't sort of look at animal welfare as just that little subset of animals. I'm the first to say that they do good work on the ground, but they allow things to farmed animals that they would be prosecuting individuals for if they were to companion animals. I think it would be the sort of making of RSPCA 2.0 if they actually threw off, you know, what is really very, very old thinking and became radical again. And the other thing I think that is a hopeful sign is some other charities getting really bolshy. Now, I'm a member of the RSPB, and I'm proud of the RSPB at the moment, because they have come out and they are looking like a really good activist organization. The statement they put out about the government aims to sort of rip up a lot of the environmental protection and U-turn on some good stuff that was in the pipeline, and was the most angry statement I have ever seen from a charity. And, you know, they're talking about taking to the streets. And with the march that Chris Packham is organising on the 27th, I think it is, of November, the March for Nature, you know, I'm sure that the RSPB, the Woodland Trust, and other charities are looking at what an incredibly precarious position we are in. This is not the time to mess about and sit on the fence. You need to sort of nail your colours. And that's what the RSPCA isn't doing. So I'm sure that within the staff, and actually the two that we met, I think were pretty much on board. I don't think they were faking it. One was Emma Slavinsky. She is head of advocacy and policy. And I think she genuinely is an ally. I'm sure that you don't go into the RSPCA, a lot of people won't go into it unless you're really concerned about animal welfare. So I think that there must be a lot of disquiet. Just to give you one other example, when we went in, we had the initial meeting in the canteen area. The canteen is not plant-based in the RSPCA, which is just horrifying. So you spend your day at your desk working for animal welfare. You come down and then you have the option to eat them. You know, how easy a change would that be? At least it would be a sort of token gesture, something you could do internally. Throw us a little bit of a crumb to start with. That would take no effort whatsoever and would be a step in the right direction.
I'm going to write to them again and ask them to do that.
Well, what we don't.
I'm going to do it. I'm going to write to them because I'm a member. So I'll write to them. I wrote to them about being plant-based heroes, and I'm going to write to them about I hadn't thought about their canteens, and I'm going to put in the same stuff that I put in my deputation here to Brighton, similar stuff and updated stuff. Yeah,
I think that would be really good. The more members that we can reach and can put the pressure on, the better. Because obviously, although a lot of income comes from the assured scheme, a lot of income comes from the member base, not necessarily in member subscriptions, because they have a fairly small member base, but they do want the legacy commitments. They want people to put them in their wills. And that's where a lot of the income comes from. So the more that we can inform the member base, the more that we can get the member base to put the pressure on themselves, the more chance I think there is of them changing, because they will be very worried about a disaffected member base.
Can I just ask, Martin, so the next phase is going to be a brainstorming session next week to think about the way forward. Is that correct?
That's correct. And then I think out of that, Alison, will come a priority list of actions. And basically sort of we need to be relatively creative. One of the problems I think we've got is that the RSPCA is quite hard to pin down. I think the Occupation Day was a great success, and you know, we all enjoyed it. And I think someone at the end of the day said, you know, it was probably the most animal lovers that have been in that building ever. But they're actually closing that office. They're selling it, and they're moving towards a very much working from home model. So that takes away sort of one focal point. The AGM was something that was obvious to look at, but that remains online. It's actually happened very recently. Whether they've not gone back to a physical AGM because they might be concerned about sort of activists, you know, we've seen that used very powerfully within quite a lot of physical AGMs, I don't know, but for whatever reason, they're staying in sort of COVID mode and remaining online. So I think we need to think out of the box a bit about how we sort of do the next
Offer them
steps.
a cooking session. You know, I did that with my students. Offer them a cooking session. I did with my students and said, what would you like to eat? And I didn't say it was going to even be vegan. I just said, what would you like to eat? I said it was veggie. What would you like to eat? And they gave me 3 dishes, and we cooked them all for them, and they were gobsmacked how lovely it was. And that's a kind of very non-threatening thing. It's a giving and a loving thing to cook with people, or cook for them and bring food. Or they might have to see it. They might think it's going to be poisoned if they think we're terrorists or whatever. But
we did bring food. It's a very good way to communicate that you come in peace. Really, it's so clear. But I think on the 15th
teacher, well, brilliant. There we go. We've got Susan the cook.
Right.
Fantastic. Yeah. Can we just have a couple of questions from people who is that okay, Martin? If there's
I'm just about wrapped up, so
okay.
It's been a bit of a sort of ramble, but hopefully you've sort of got the full picture. And no, very happy to take any questions or just hear comments, really.
So who would like to ask a question?
I was just also really wanting to know, I mean, like you said, people who go to work at the RSPCA obviously very much have an interest in animal welfare and doing better for the animals. You personally, what was the thing that brought you into animal welfare and RSPCA?
I've been vegan for a lot of years, and like a lot of us, I was sort of vegetarian before that, and animal welfare has always been something that I've been very passionate about. With regards to the RSPCA, frankly, it was someone that I sort of vaguely knew who became branch chair, and found that he didn't have any branch trustees, and so he contacted all the people he could think of who might be up for it, and I said what I say too often. I said, yes, I can help, and found myself a trustee. And genuinely, there were good people there trying to do the right thing. The animal welfare officer that we recruited in those 4 years and financed is out there, in all weathers, rescuing wildlife and companion animals, and does a really good job. What I do know is that there were a few people that he asked who he assumed were going to be receptive, and basically it was over their dead body, because they were already aware of the sort of RSPCA's policies, and these were vegans. These were people who really were very, very put off the RSPCA because they sort of knew the reality of the charity at the centre.
Do you still keep in touch with people that you worked with in the RSPCA?
I do, because in fact, the guy that recruited me into the branch, terrific guy, he's a primary school teacher and was really very, very enthusiastic about rebuilding the branch and doing the right thing for animals locally. And then he went on to not only be the branch chair, but also to become the chair of the Southeast branches. So he was that interested. However, the closer he got to the centre, the more he himself started to become concerned about the RSPCA. Particularly what put him off was he could start to see the waste, the money that was being spent on things that were not related to animal welfare. So on the one hand, you had the RSPCA cutting frontline jobs, removing welfare officers, which is actually one reason why we as a branch recruited one, because we didn't have any welfare officer anywhere close. So if we had an animal that needed to be rescued or there was a report of cruelty, we couldn't get anybody. You'd have to get them from North Kent or something to come down. But on the other hand, what he found was things like the great big rock with the logo on. And so he has now resigned, which is a pretty big step because he was so committed and he was such a sort of force for good. And he rebuilt the Folkestone branch, and it was almost a model of how a branch should work. But then, as he went up, purely still in a voluntary role, that's when he became so disillusioned. And I'm seeing him for a drink in a couple of weeks' time, and we're going to compare notes. But he has now been totally sort of turned against them. And a really nice bloke who was a great, passionate advocate for animals.
That's such a sad story. That is absolutely devastating to have somebody so passionate and diligent, but then ultimately just get burnt out by not being able to put forward the things that need to be put forward.
Yeah, if you drive people like that away, I think you've got a problem. Yeah.
Has anybody got any questions here? Do you want to, anybody want to ask questions? Because there weren't any questions as such in the chat. It was more just like comments and things like that, and what people, anybody got anything that they want to ask Rowan or Rachel or Susan or Simon?
I've probably sort of swamped you with my ramblings, but hopefully you'll sort of get a feel for the sort of what is involved. You know, we'd love to have you, all of you.
Yeah, I'd love to get involved.
Yeah,
like
that would be great,
around
Alison.
at some, pardon?
That would be great, Alison.
Yeah, I'd like to bounce
Yeah,
around at
sure.
the
Yeah.
RSPCA offices and meet the managers and give
Yeah.
them some love.
Some of you may know Nor.
Yeah.
Yeah, oh, yeah,
Robert
yeah,
Norman,
lovely
yeah.
Norb.
He used to work for the RSPCA.
Yeah, yeah.
So not only do we have a national trustee and an ex-national trustee, an ex-branch trustee, we have an ex-staff member as well. So we've got sort of the full set in some ways. And the fact that 3 people who are actually, you know, we're sort of really very hands-on, are so passionate about this campaign, I think sort of reflects what we have found in the charity ourselves. And I've been talking to people about the RSPCA, just, you know, it crops up and I have a chat and people don't know. And they tend to
Absolutely.
come away horrified.
Have you got any questions, or did you just want to, are you quite happy just to keep chatting? Or Rowan, do you want to ask anything, or Rachel or Susan? Yeah,
I've got a half comment and half question, I guess. It's just because when Martin was mentioning Sea Shepherd before, it reminded me of what's been going on this year with the founder, Captain Paul Watson, resigning from Sea Shepherd because of the change in management and all these issues. That's the new management. I've heard from reading Watson's post about how they're wanting to reassign the vessels to being research vessels rather than actually direct action ones. So I'm thinking, is there a more of a worldwide issue or a Western political kind of influence of the politics, which is getting these once very powerful and very influential non-violent direct action, and also with the RSPCA as well, with the bit more radical roots kind of thing of actually changing the whole situation now, becoming far more maybe ineffective, or just getting becoming more timid or something. I don't know if anyone has any insight on that, or if it's just like a trend which these organizations are going in the same kind of direction. Thanks. And also thank you for everything you shared.
Oh, well, thank you, Rowan, for attending. I think they become more corporate. I think that's possibly the sort of the umbrella sort of term for what happens. Obviously, if you've got a charity of the sort of size of the RSPCA, it's got to be run on very solid foundations. It's got to be businesslike. It's employing a lot of staff, and it's got a lot of overheads, and it needs the revenue. But the problem, I think, is the possibility that you tip over to the dark side. And you do, I guess, maybe with the assured scheme in the early days, they thought they were doing the right thing, but then it becomes this sort of monster, really. And how do you kill something that has become so important to the income of the charity? And I guess if people are there for too long, they sort of become quite blinkered, and they don't have the ability to take that step back and have a look at what has gone wrong. I don't know how much this sort of stuff is debated within the hallowed walls of the RSPCA headquarters. Are they sort of beating themselves up as to sort of what their direction should be? They keep on announcing sort of new strap lines, but it's just words. It's just sort of woolly words. And if you, in the occupation, as you probably remember, Michael, the walls are covered in slogans and sort of fluffy aspirational statements, which don't actually mean a thing if your action doesn't then match what your words are saying.
Well, the impression that I got from being there was that they were very much companion animal orientated. All of the real life pictures up were of cats and dogs, and I mean, and the only the pictures that they had of animal agriculture were when they were showing the old tools that they used for animal slaughter. They had some bolt guns from the 1920s and 30s, and they even had a stuffed rooster that was equipped for cockfighting. It was all very eerie stuff, but it was it's very much the goals are obviously very much aimed towards the welfare of companion animals as opposed to animals as a whole. I mean, even that, even in the front entrance there, they have a life-size statue of a dairy cow that celebrities come in and write their name on, and we all thought it was quite disheartening that right on the forehead there, Tony Blair signed his name right on the forehead. Yeah, no, that's precisely it. It was shocking.
Yeah. Well, I've got the latest RSPCA magazine because I'm still a member, because you have to be a member to be a branch trustee, and my membership has not run out. Pretty much the only reference in here to farmed animals is a smallish piece about the RSPCA Assured scheme, where they are actually promoting eating turkey and pigs in blankets for Christmas in their own magazine. It's just words fail.
Yeah, they just need a culture shift. They just need a big bomb, but not a bomb, but a culture shift. And it's kind of, there's so many complaints, it's almost like, oh my God. Whereas actually we need to do things about it, and we need to somehow reach them. And I have to say, I'm personally a great believer always in love, as in going with a warm heart, friendly and in love. And that's one of the things I absolutely adore about Animal Rebellion, is the idea of non-violence in all its forms, and that people are more engaged when you're loving and caring. And in my philosophy class years ago, my philosophy teacher, who was gorgeous, she's one of those women you'd find it hard not to love her. She wore a lovely long sort of flowing velvet cloak, and she was saying to me, because I get very upset, like I'm sure everybody does here, about I can't bear, as Simon knows this a lot, about animal agriculture, well, the whole thing to do with animals. I get very despairing and upset, and it makes me angry, which is not very productive, and I know that. But and I was talking about it with her, and she said that everybody's got love in them, but some people have got a bit lost. Their love has got a bit lost, and what you've got to do is find a way to help them get out, and then love your enemy kind of thing, if you like. And I just think that's the best way to work with people. And when I gave that impassioned speech, I mean, I think that was part of the reason that I ended up with the plant-based meals here in the schools.
I think that's an absolutely fantastic point to be made, and yeah, in RSPCA, I think is a fantastic example to being mindful of. And it's one of the reasons why I think that everybody really should look up at the history of the RSPCA and its origins. Like I was saying, just those three founders were just absolutely unbelievable. With Reverend going to debtor's prison to cover the finances, I know so many charities that would much rather prefer having somebody go off to debtor's prison to cover their finances, as opposed to going out doing fundraising. May not be
and sell them possibilities well, sell them possibilities.
Yeah,
You know, wouldn't it be great if you were a world leader in this and sell them that kind of stuff? Yeah, I'd be very interested in being involved in that, Martin.
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Please.
Well, the invitation is there, so I guess
Yeah, I'm registered to come on Tuesday, so
good,
I'd like to
good.
participate, please.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'm sort of conscious of time, and we've gone over the
Yeah.
hour, but maybe I can just end on the RSPCA's own statement about what it's all about. So this is their word. So everything we do is focused on achieving our vision to live in a world where all animals are respected and treated with compassion. I think we're going to use their words to bash them about the head with love, of course.
Yeah, with love, always
with love, but they need a rocket up the backside, as you've said.
They definitely do. Yeah, yeah.
And we're the ones to administer it.
We are. We are.
Yes.
Hey.
Yeah. Well, thank you everybody for listening, for your participation. It's been quite nice having a small group actually, and just being able to have a bit of a chat.
Yeah.
thank you very much.
If you can join us on the 15th, please do.
Thank you very much for coming along and having this conversation with us this evening, Martin. And thank you all for coming along and you know, and joining in. And hope to see you on the 15th. If not on the 15th, see you out on the street on a march or in an action. And yeah, let's keep pushing this message for a plant-based future.